Thank you very much, Alex, for the introduction, and also, of course, to Thorney for their support of our company. We IPO'd the company in July last year, after probably being around since about 2005. We took very careful steps to make sure we could get this company to cash flow positive before we IPO'd, so that anyone who comes into the company as shareholders at the IPO is looking at mainly upside and minimum downside risk. And so that's our philosophy with this company. Get to cash flow positive and then start to develop the various verticals that we're in. So if I have a look at, first of all, there's a disclaimer there. I'll just let you read that quickly. We're a listed company, so I'm sure you've seen it all before. So the investment highlights, as I've said before, financially, cash flow positive. We wanted to make sure that we were coming on with minimal downside risk. Partnerships with global majors. So when I come through some of the verticals that we're in, we're working with some of the world's largest companies in those verticals on technical development. We have a platform technology, as Alex said, patented. It is fully patented, Alex. We've got about 27 patent families now running globally. And the development pipeline that we have is funded. So we've been very successful going and getting grant funding to develop our technology globally. And so that's a feature, again, where our shareholders have not had to pay for the development of this technology. Of course, everyone has a highly experienced team, and so do we, and personally invested. So we raised capital before our IPO last in 2014. And so all the management, staff and board of the company put their own hard-earned money into this company. So we're very passionate about the technology, otherwise we wouldn't have put our money in. We're also very positive about the application of this technology globally. And when you look at some of the verticals that I'll talk about today, water and wastewater, as we've said before, and quite highly topical in several areas there. I'll talk a bit about aquaculture. I'll talk a bit about freshwater lake remediation, blue-green algae. I'll talk about agriculture and crop protection and how the increasing restriction on the use of pesticides and fungicides is actually a great tailwind for our business. I'll talk about CO2 capture. How can the one technology also be used in CO2 capture? Hopefully I'll give you an explanation for how that works for us. And then I'll talk about advanced batteries, which is the latest piece of research and development coming through our company, and for which we've just received $3 million from the Australian government to develop. So quite a broad range of things that this technology can touch. And I'm sure you sort of keep wondering yourself, well, what the hell is this technology? I'll jump forward to what it is. And I've got my props here. So these props are the ones I used when I IPO'd. I've got a rock, a toilet roll, and a bit of powder. So the rock, this is magnesite, magnesium carbonate. We have our own mine in South Australia where we mine this. We grind that up to a fine powder, sort of like flour. And that fine powder we then drop down through a reactor. This is the bit that is the patented bit. So there's my reactor demonstration model. This reactor is heated on the outside up to 1,000 degrees centigrade. And as the powder just falls down, like imagine having a handful of flour and just dropping it, that's similar to what happens in our reactor. As that powder falls down through the reactor, any trapped gases that are in the mineral or in the rock bubble out. And so what we do is we can control and make sure that those minerals are maximum in terms of surface area. So surface area equals reactivity. Reactivity equals added value in use. So this particular calciner or kiln, or whatever you want to call it, furnace, is unique in that it can make 5 to 10 times the surface area of any other technology. So that is the first advantage. The second advantage is we use magnesite, but there are other companies around such as Heidelberg Cement who use limestone, and they use limestone because that's the main component in cement. As you can imagine, as the limestone falls down through the reactor, half the weight of the limestone is CO2. As that CO2 comes out of the limestone, it's in a concentrated form in this reactor. It makes its way back out the top of the reactor. So you capture actually the CO2 coming out of the limestone for cement and lime. That is 2/3 of their emissions. So cement and lime are responsible for 8% of global CO2 emissions, and 2/3 of it comes from the rock. So our technology is a way to capture those emissions. Okay? So they're the two aspects of the same technology coin: ability to capture CO2 and the ability to produce very high surface area materials. What does that mean in terms of our business? This is a horribly complex slide, so sorry about this, but I'll try and describe it as best I can. I think, Alex, this is probably the most complex technology company you've invested in. It's always a bit hard to explain, but hopefully you can understand the basics of what it is. Here's our value chain at the top here, a mine, our calciner at Bacchus Marsh, just 40 minutes away, and at the end of that chain we can take the powder that we produce and we mix it with water or hydrate it. That actually goes into 3 different verticals for us. First vertical is water and wastewater, globally a huge market. Second vertical, aquaculture and freshwater lake remediation, also a large market. I haven't even tried to determine the size of the freshwater lake remediation yet, but it's going to be significant. And then thirdly, agriculture and crop protection as a foliar spray. So we've been testing this for 5 years against funguses and mites. And it doesn't kill them, it just repels them. So we're nearly there on our APVMA submission, and we've also just signed a license deal with a major European crop protection company. And those first sales should be coming this European summer. So in market here already, generating revenue. In market in aquaculture, generating revenue. So the biggest revenue grower there, China. We're shipping to China. Last year we shipped probably 10 times what we did in prior years. China is the largest farm prawn market in the world. So that's very good for us in terms of that particular part of the business. Coming this way to CO2 mitigation, we've built a plant that is piloting the technology in Belgium with Heidelberg Cement, Cemex, Loast, and Solvay have recently joined that consortium. You can see it looks like a very tiny picture there. That's actually a 60-metre tall tower that we've constructed with money from the European Union, and it's sitting right next to a Heidelberg cement plant to demonstrate the CO2 capture in cement production. And the very end is battery materials. How does this technology intersect with battery materials? So if you start with a different rock, not magnesite, not limestone, but manganese. Manganese is one of the main materials in a lithium-ion battery. And if you can imagine you have a very porous particle, the lithium ions can get in and out much more quickly. So the battery development piece is all about making a better battery material. And again, that particular one, we recently got $3 million from the Australian government to do an advanced hybrid batteries cooperative research centre project. So lots of different verticals, all the same technology, some here commercialised, and then moving back through a funded R&D pipeline that's coming through. Okay. How are we going so far this year? Pretty good start. In terms of revenues, just as wastewater and that sort of treatment overseas and in Australia, we're up 40%, 48%, quarter to quarter. Also, into the States, we started selling into the States, but we came across an excellent acquisition opportunity, and we recently raised in October 12 million capital, and we're just completing that acquisition now. That is set to double our revenue, that acquisition. And that gives us a very nice leverage into the States and base for the States expansion, mainly in water and wastewater treatment. We signed our first licence for the crop protection product in Europe, and that will start commercial sales come next European summer. So the news flow there is to keep an eye on that. And that was with Afapasa, that's one of the largest sulphur-based crop protection companies in Europe. And lastly, the battery funding, as I mentioned before, $3 million in funding just announced in August, coming in from the Australian government to develop advanced battery materials. In terms of looking ahead, again, along these different verticals, what is it that we're trying to achieve over the course of the next 12 months? We're going to close that acquisition of that US-based company and effectively start to lock in a doubling of our revenues. Exploit the synergies that we have with the business there, with our superior technology and their base. Aquaculture, continue the Chinese expansion, largest market in the world and a focus for us in terms of expanding our aquaculture use. And then progress the commercialisation of freshwater lake remediation. A couple of other companies listed on the ASX focusing on that. We believe our product's better. It binds phosphates and nitrates, not just phosphates, into a high surface area structure. Next is agricultural crop protection. We get those first commercial sales, as I said before, and then progress licensing deals for the rest of the world. In terms of CO2 mitigation, We're going to run this pilot for another year and demonstrate the robustness of the technology to the end of 2020. And we're also right now currently seeking financing from the European Commission for the next scale-up. The current plan is about 5% of the throughput of a cement plant. The next scale-up is going to be 20%. And if you've been to Europe and you've understood where the countries are going there on zero net emissions, this type of technology is really resonating. And lastly, advanced batteries. We're going to set up collaborative agreements with new R&D networks, so we're going to continue to widen the development networks that we have with batteries. And part of what we're doing with the CRC money is producing our first pouch cells for testing. So that's part of the milestone that we're targeting for batteries. So, plenty happening in a news flow sense. Just in terms of the capital structure of the business, as I say, we IPO'd July. You can see there, in terms of the investments, Thorney have been a great supporter of us, coming in as a substantial shareholder recently with the last capital raise. Board and management, you can see there the amount that they've invested in the company as well. We've been through several escrow releases, so most of the company's now on free float. So any nervousness that people had around shares coming out of escrow, they're 90% past. So all those escrow shares are out except for the remaining few with directors and management. There's only a few more warrants left. They were the promoters' warrants when we IPO'd. So really the equity structure of the company as you see today is pretty close to the free float. Excellent. And lastly, our little rebrand and motto, Mars is for quitters. We decided to come up with something that would have a little bit more cut through than we're a great sustainable company. We thought this was a great joke, but then when you think about it a bit more fully, there's a pretty serious message in there. So while that comes across as a little bit flippant, have a think more closely about it, because Mars really is for quitters, and what this company is about is using its businesses and its technology to really improve the sustainability of the industries on the planet. Thank you very much.